Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan Elrom.
And I'm Erin Viner.
In our top story, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has addressed the European Union. This is the first time in 22 years that an Israeli premier has visited the EU headquarters, and his talk came at a critical time. The Prime Minister faced enormous opposition from EU ministers over the recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. The European Union's foreign policy chief, Federica Mogherini, blasted U.S. President Donald Trump for his decision to recognize Jerusalem. But Netanyahu pointed out that she was silent as Arabs rained down rockets into Israeli communities. He said the president's declaration does not hinder peace, but instead makes a peace agreement possible. Netanyahu told the European leaders that we are faced with an historic opportunity for peace in the Holy Land. He called on the EU to follow America's lead and recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and move their embassies here.
PA leader Mahmoud Abbas has announced that he will not meet with the Vice President of the United States during his upcoming visit to Israel. A spokesman for Abbas said that the United States has crossed a red line and that there will be no communication between PA and U.S. officials. A representative for the Trump administration expressed the White House's disappointment, saying that the PA is once again walking away from a chance to discuss peace. Egypt's Coptic Pope also declined to receive the vice president in protest of President Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem, which he said failed to take into account the feelings of millions of Arabs.
The U.S. House of Representatives has approved the Taylor Force Act, which calls for the withholding of aid to the Palestinian Authority unless the PA stops paying salaries to terrorists. The legislation was named for the West Point graduate who was brutally murdered by an Arab terrorist during a visit to Israel last year. The Taylor Force Act will ensure that American taxpayer dollars are not allocated to fund Palestinian terror. Arab murderers and their families receive monthly stipends from the PA, which many lawmakers argue provides an incentive for terror. Ahead of the vote, Congressman Ed Royce of California said the PA's martyr payments are part of a perverse pay-to-slay system which uses a sliding scale. The longer the jail sentence, the greater the reward. The Republican lawmaker said the highest payments go to those who prove most brutal.
Jews and Jewish institutions around the world remain on high alert as angry Arabs and pro-Palestinian activists protest President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem. 2 synagogues were firebombed in Sweden last week after hundreds of protesters called to shoot the Jews in an anti-Semitic march in Malmö. An Israeli restaurant in the Netherlands was vandalized by an Arab man wrapped in a Palestinian flag, and there were large-scale protests at U.S. embassies throughout the world. Angry activists protested in Times Square, burning Israeli flags and calling for the destruction of the State of Israel. The crowd chanted, "We don't want 2 states, we want 1948, referring to the land before the creation of the State of Israel. A spokesperson for the Trump administration deflected accusations that the president's declaration is to blame for the wave of violent protests in Israel and throughout the world. Sarah Huckabee Sanders said that the protesters themselves are to blame for the violence.
Israelis have been since scrambling for bomb shelters as Arabs in Gaza resume their relentless rocket fire on southern Israel. There's never been a total cessation of attacks launched from the area, but since President Trump's announcement on Jerusalem, the Jewish state has been subjected to a drastic increase in aggression from the Hamas-run enclave. Israelis living in the southern town of Sderot must be within running distance to bomb shelters at all times, and many choose to just sleep in the shelters. Israel has remained on high alert as Arabs rioted for several days after the president's declaration. A security guard was stabbed at the Jerusalem Central bus station by an Arab terrorist who then tried to flee the scene but was caught and arrested following a short chase. The wounded guard remains in critical but stable condition.
Commuters in New York City had a very close call last week when an attempted terrorist attack was narrowly thwarted. In what could only be described as a miracle, the terrorist pipe bomb detonated early, severely burning his stomach and hands, preventing him from detonating his suicide vest and possibly killing dozens of people during rush hour. The Muslim terrorist told authorities that he was angry with Israel and was influenced by the Islamic State terror group.
The Prime Minister of Lebanon was furious after a commander of Iran's proxy army in Iraq visited his country's border with Israel. The leader of the radical Shia faction, Asaib Ahal al-Haq, was in Lebanon at the invitation of the Hezbollah terror group. Both are proxy armies of Iran. A video shows the commander standing in the border region overlooking Israeli towns and saying that his militia stands with their Hezbollah brothers and they are ready to attack Israel.
A Buenos Aires court has issued an arrest warrant for the former president of Argentina. Cristina Fernández de Kirchner is sought for covering up Iran's involvement in the bombing of the Amia Jewish Center in Buenos Aires in 1994. Several members of Kirchner's former cabinet have been detained for corruption in connection with the bombing, including the country's former foreign minister, the former public works minister, and the former vice president during Kirchner's presidency. We recently reported that the inquiry into the death of the federal prosecutor investigating the cover-up has been reopened and is now being treated as a murder investigation. 85 people were killed in the bombing, which was perpetrated by Iran's proxy army Hezbollah. It was the worst attack in Argentina's history.
Forbes magazine has ranked Israeli flavors as one of the top 10 food trends of the year. The prestigious publication mentioned several Israeli restaurants in America which are making waves in the culinary world. The 2017 James Beard Award for Chef of the Year was given to Michael Solomonoff of the Zahav restaurant in Philadelphia. The Forbes article said Israeli flavors and cooking techniques are a popular trend on the cuisine scene and are likely to be here for a long time.
Jerusalem's Tower of David Museum has opened its exhibit commemorating 100 years since the British liberated Jerusalem from the Ottoman Turks. The exhibition, entitled A General and a Gentleman, Allenby at the Gates of Jerusalem, highlights Great Britain's commitment to protecting the holy sites in Jerusalem and General Allenby's promise to preserve freedom of religion in the Holy Land. Jews suffered greatly under the Ottoman occupation, and many of them viewed the liberation of Jerusalem as a Hanukkah miracle.
Jews around the world are celebrating the festival of Hanukkah, which commemorates the Maccabean revolt and the rededication of the Holy Temple in the 2nd century before the Common Era. After outlawing the practice of Judaism and attempting to force the Jews to worship his idols, the Hellenistic ruler Antiochus Epiphanes sent his army into Jerusalem. They slaughtered thousands of Israelites and desecrated the Holy Temple. But a group of brave Jews, led by Judah Maccabee, chose to fight rather than become slaves to paganism. The small but courageous Jewish army defeated the mighty Greeks, cleansed the temple, and reinstated the practice of Judaism in the land of Israel. During this 8-day holiday, Jews light candles to commemorate the purification of the temple and to remember the miracle that God performed in those days in order to restore His people to His covenant in His holy city, and to remember that God's light will shine from Jerusalem forever.
We at Israel Now News would like to wish all of our viewers a Chag Chanukah Sameach.
Happy Hanukkah.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host Josh Reinstein, and we're here on another beautiful day on our rooftop studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is David Siegel. He's the CEO of Elnett Israel. David, thank you for being on the show.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
David, tell our viewers a little bit about what is Elnett.
Well, Elnett is an organization that helps Israel connect with Europe. We believe that Europe is very important. It's Israel's largest trading partner. It's powerful in terms of global diplomacy, so it's important for Israel to develop relations with these leaders in Europe.
David, I know you as one of our top diplomats as Consul General to the United States in California, the Southwest region. How different is it working with European entities versus working with the United States of America?
So when I was approached to work with Europe, I'm a specialist on America, but when I was told and I realized that the Europeans simply don't come to Israel like the Americans do. So if you look at the numbers, you'll see that roughly 80% of American members of Congress have come to Israel so that they know Israel firsthand. And then you look at the European numbers and you see that their equivalents, the members of parliament in Europe, come to Israel, you know, it's like less than 10%, you realize that that gap is our challenge, to fill that gap, to make sure that European leaders come here, meet with Israeli leaders, and understand the issues that Israel's facing firsthand.
We see a real bias against Israel in Europe. Is it because of malicious intent, or do you believe that it's a lack of information and education?
Well, it's a combination. There's anti-Semitism in Europe, as we know. It's raising its head. There are Muslim populations that are radicalized in Europe, but that, together with the fact that these leaders don't know Israel firsthand, is a challenge that we face. So we see Europe as the weakest link in Israel's relationships in the world, and a very important link that we have to maintain.
We have a problem with Western Europe when it comes to diplomatic relations, but with Eastern Europe we seem to be getting a lot more support. Where's the divergence there?
So Western Europe is a larger challenge for Israel, not all the countries. We're focusing on all 28. Eastern Europe are friendly to Israel. These are the newer democracies, so naturally they tend to gravitate towards Israel because of their past under communism. Our main challenges are to really build our political muscle in France, in Germany, in Brussels, where the EU is and where the institutions of Europe are, NATO, which is an ally of Israel, and to build those alliances.
They say 50 years from now, many countries in Western Europe will actually be majority Muslim. How does that a challenge for the relationship with Israel?
Well, it is a big challenge, and we do feel the clock ticking, and Europe is changing, and we have to make sure that we build relationships with those leaders and make sure that they understand that Iran, for example, is not just a threat to Israel, but the more you have Iran take over the Middle East, it will be a threat for Europe, because the immigrants, the radicalized Sunni Muslims that are fighting Iran will move to Europe and will become Europe's problem as well. So what we find is when we sit down with Europeans and explain this in depth, they understand that it's not just our issue, it's their issue too.
There was a real fear when Europe let in over 1 million, much over 1 million of Syrian refugees over last year, that would be dangerous for relations with Israel. But now we're seeing that it's actually dangerous for the states themselves. How are European countries contending with that phenomenon?
Well, we see the Europeans really having to deal with a whole set of new issues. There's a problem of Russia. There's a problem of immigration, certainly from the Middle East and Syria. ISIS, now as it loses its strongholds in the Middle East, it's moving virtually onto the internet and into new theaters like Europe. That's where we're seeing the terror attacks, and they're reaching out to Israel because unfortunately we are the experts in fighting terrorism. So they want help in securing airports, in doing counterterrorism, cybersecurity together, high-tech together, which all relates to security in the end. So in this sense, Israel is becoming a more and more valued partner to Europe, and we want to capitalize on this moment.
What's the future of Elnett leave for us? What do you think is going to happen in the next 5 years for Elnett?
So we're planning to expand our operations. Right now we have 4 offices in Europe, in the heart of Europe, as I said, Eastern Europe, France, Germany, Brussels, and so on. And we have operations in additional countries. And our goal is to double our operations in the coming year because, again, the sense of urgency is very much there. The movement to attack Israel economically, the BDS movement, it's coming from Europe. The prospects of blacklists, of economically sanctioning Israel in Europe is very real, and we believe right around the corner, and we have to fight hard right now to make sure that that is turned around.
Dave, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
Well, first of all, we appreciate your support for Israel. We invite you to come and see Israel firsthand, and we invite you to fight with us side by side because Christians and Jews share a unique alliance in history, in religion, in culture, but also in what we're dealing with in the current world. The real threats to our populations, to our families, to our civilization, and this is why we have to stick together and educate others about what this is all about.
Thank you, David, for being on the show, and thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, the return to Zion with Karen Hayasod.
Shalom and welcome to the Return to Zion with Keren HaYesod. I'm Eliezer Moody Sandberg, World Chairman of Keren HaYesod United Israel Appeal, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. Today, you will witness the fulfillment of biblical prophecy through the gathering of the exiles. God bless you from Jerusalem.
Me and my family always prayed to come to Israel because it's a home, it's our home. 10 months ago, I made Aliyah with my sister. We are living together in Haifa. I'm worrying about my family because the situation in Ukraine now really terrible.
The past decade and a half has witnessed a frightening upsurge of worldwide anti-Semitism, unparalleled since the 1930s. Across Europe, incitement, desecration of Jewish institutions, attacks on Jewish property, and acts of terror, including murder, are striking fear into Jewish communities. From London to Berlin, Brussels to Copenhagen, Jews are being harassed, assaulted, and murdered. The situation is particularly intolerable in France and in Ukraine. In France, violent crimes against Jews have become commonplace.
Avec la multiplication des actes antisémites en France, donc déjà j'ai peur pour moi, mais j'ai aussi peur pour ma famille, pour ma femme, pour mes enfants plus tard.
In eastern Ukraine, over 1 million people have been displaced. In the escalating chaos and lawlessness, Jews have once again become scapegoats, with many anti-Semitic incidents reported.
When I was in school, my classmates told me that, oh, you're Jewish, it's not normal in Ukraine, why you are Jewish? It was very hard for me to speak with them, to describe every time what I do in Ukraine and why I'm Jewish.
I will give to you and your descendants after you the land of your sojourning, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession. But Israel has always been the homeland of the Jewish people. Throughout their 2,000-year exile, the Jews prayed daily to return to the land of Israel. In 1917, Great Britain issued the Balfour Declaration. In 1920, Keren HaYesod was established to raise funds for this purpose. Since the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, Keren HaYesod has helped bring 3.5 million olim to Israel from the four corners of the earth.
This is Bible prophecy come into fulfillment. It's not just my heart, but I can feel the heart of Abba Father. Abba Father in heaven is so pleased to see his children who are scattered all around the globe is coming back home.
From India to Africa to Europe, record-breaking numbers of Jews are eager to come home. Aliyah rose dramatically in the past year, hitting a 10-year high, despite the security threats that face Israel. Keren HaYesod operates in 45 countries throughout the world. The Keren HaYesod law, passed by the Knesset in January 1956, grants the organization a unique fundraising status. In close coordination with the government and the Jewish Agency for Israel, and in partnership with the global Jewish community and Friends of Israel, Keren HaYesod promotes Aliyah and other national priorities. We need you, dear friends, to be our partners in this noble mission of helping the people of Israel return home before the window of opportunity slams shut and live safely in its secured homeland. Keren HaYesod, with your generous assistance, has redoubled its efforts to facilitate every Jew who wishes to fulfill the biblical prophecy. Friends of Israel, the Holy Land and its people needs you now. He will raise a banner for the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judah from the four quarters of the earth.
Come join Keren HaYesod in fulfilling biblical prophecy. Let's bless Israel together.
To donate and get information, call us at 1-800-505-1665 or visit our website at www.khisrael.org.
Korea's nuclear program and North Korea's flagrant violation of its nuclear agreement with the West is of paramount importance to the State of Israel. And not only because North Korea is a hostile country to Israel, and that Israel soon could come within range of North Korea's intercontinental ballistic missiles, which are capable of carrying nuclear warheads. The North Korean nuclear issue is important for Israel because of Iran. Iran is indirectly, at very least, an ally of North Korea. The North Koreans built Syria's nuclear reactor, which was destroyed in 2007, fortunately, and Syria, of course, is the closest possible ally of Iran, and there has been evidence to suggest that there are closer relations on the nuclear level and on the ballistic level between Iran and North Korea. But more importantly, the Iranians are taking close note of how the world reacts, or fails to react, to North Korea's flagrant violations of its nuclear deal. The North Korean nuclear deal is actually stricter than the Iranian nuclear deal. North Korea cannot, under its deal, enrich uranium for peaceful energy purposes, but the Iranian deal can. Iran was able to maintain, under its deal, its entire infrastructure for uranium enrichment, including its facilities, including potentially 100,000 centrifuges, and those centrifuges can become more advanced centrifuges that are capable of enriching uranium faster and at a higher level. And so, if the Iranians note that the world fails to react to North Korea's violation, Iranians will conclude that in 8 or 9 years, when its deal ends, then this entire infrastructure can then go back online, be plugged back in, and it can enrich uranium that is enough for maybe 100, perhaps even 200 nuclear weapons, and the world may just sit and do nothing.
Lift up your eyes and look around. All your children gather and come to you. The biblical prophecy is unfolding right before our very eyes. The people of Israel are returning to the Promised Land after 2,000 years of exile. But millions of Jews are still longing to come home. Anti-Semitism threatens many of the Jews. We must rescue them before the window of opportunity slams shut. Bless Israel by supporting Keren HaYesod United Israel Appeal, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. Together, we can fulfill the prophecy of the Bible.
Let us bless Israel together.
To donate and get information, call us at 1-800-505-1665 or visit our website at www.khisrael.org.
Please stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
Jerusalem, the center of the Middle East, the center of the world, the city of God, and right here almost 40 years ago, led by the Holy Spirit, Christian leaders from around the world established the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem, to demonstrate to the Jewish people that they are not alone, but that millions of Bible-believing Christians are standing with them, still believing in God's ancient covenant promises that He made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Today, the Christian Embassy has become an active voice of support to the Jewish people. Over the next few minutes, you will meet our team, and more importantly, you will meet those people who we could bless here in the land of Israel. It is such an exciting time to be your embassy, your voice here in the land of Israel. Take a look.
It is God's design to make Israel a light unto the nations. We at the ICJ are passionate about Israel and about her relationship with the world. This is why we have celebrated the Feast of Tabernacles in Jerusalem since 1980. We have now branches in more than 90 countries all over the world, and we connect believers from more than 170 nations with Israel. The plan of God for Israel also includes the plan for all the nations. This is why we are so excited.
My name is Emma Villarreal. I represent the country of Mexico. Zechariah 14 talks about how all the nations of the world are going to come together to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. And we don't want to wait into the new Jerusalem for that to happen. We want as heaven as it is on earth, so we're starting right now.
Through the love and financial support of Christians like you, Elderly Holocaust survivors are being taken care of. But this home is not just buildings. It's a loving community where we as ICJ have become, as some residents would say, the family they once lost. What an awesome privilege. And with the ongoing expansion and the new developments, we are excited about the future of this ICJ home for Holocaust survivors.
ואני מודה מכל הלב באמת לשגרירות מה שהם עושים בשבילנו. שאחרי מה שאנחנו עברנו יש דבר כזה ואני מלא תודה.
Because of your partnership, we've been able to dramatically impact Israeli lives. Your giving has played an active role in transforming not only individual lives, but it also impacts the future of Israel. Through our work here in Israel, we've been able to provide comfort and be a voice of hope and reconciliation for the many people groups in this land.
המלגה שקיבלתי מהשגרירות הנוצרית ומזה שהבנתי שאנשים מסביב לעולם פשוט מאמינים בי ותומכים בי, אני יודעת שאשיג את החלום שלי.
ICEJ continues working to bring God's people home from the four corners of the earth. Because of your faithful giving, we have been able to welcome Jewish people to their biblical homeland of Israel through sponsoring flights, transportation assistance, and helping immigrants start a new life. It has been a privilege for the ICEJ to help fulfill the lifelong dreams of so many who have waited so long to return home, to reunite them with their families, and to be a part of their new beginning.
The Christian Embassy, Jerusalem, has been our friend for many, many years. Their donations and their help make days like today possible. Christians around the world, they are our best friends.
እና የበለጠ ደግሞ ለነሱ ምስጋና የምናቀርብ እኛ ምንም ማለት አንችልም። ውለታቸውን እግዚአብሔር ይክፈለው እና ደግሞ በዚህ እንዳያቆሙ እግዚአብሔር ይስጥልን። ውለታቸውን እግዚአብሔር ይክፈለው።
It is so exciting to see God rebuilding Zion, to see Him restoring His people back to their land. No matter where you live, you too can participate in what God is doing here in the land of Israel. Jesus said, "Whatever you have done to the least of my brethren, you have done to me." Today, you can show the love of Christ to His people. Let us be your embassy, your voice here in Jerusalem. And if you haven't yet partnered with us, go to icej.org/partnership and join us today.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan Elrom.
And I'm Erin Viner reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.